Ancient and Medieval Adventures Camp presents Beowulf and Grendel. This is the tale of Beowulf, a strong and mighty warrior of the Geatish clan, who time and time again braved battles with terrible monsters. The story begins with the threat of the monster Grendel, who terrorized the Danish king, Hrothgar, and his kingdom. So, Beowulf made his way to Daneland with his best soldiers. As the day turned to night, the Geatish men shared a feast with Hrothgar and his people in the great hall. After the feast was over, Beowulf and his men took turns sleeping while they waited for the monster Grendel to arrive. Grendel made his way to the king's hall in the dead of night, slowly creeping through the dark towards the sleeping warriors. Suddenly, Grendel burst into the hall and quickly began to attack. Hiding himself, Beowulf quietly watched the monster and waited for the right time to strike, but Grendel spotted the great warrior and reached out to grab him. Beowulf was too fast for the creature, and he grabbed Grendel's arm. Using his great strength, Beowulf threw the monster to the ground and began to fight with him. The rest of Beowulf's men also struck the monster, causing it to scream in pain. Greatly injured, Grendel gave up and made his way out the door and back to his cave. The next day, Beowulf told Hrothgar and his people of Grendel's defeat, and the people cheered with joy. Everyone gathered in the great hall to celebrate Beowulf's success, and Hrothgar thanked Beowulf for his help, giving him many great gifts. Hrothgar was very happy that Beowulf brought peace back to his land, and the people began to repair the hall that had been ruined the night before. That night Beowulf's men fell fast asleep on the floor of the great hall, not knowing that danger was to come once again. Waiting in the pitch-black night was the mother of Grendel. She too was a monster, but even more frightening than her son. The beast's mother snuck into the great hall and quietly walked amongst the sleeping men. She wanted revenge and searched through the men for the warrior that had defeated her son. But Beowulf was not there, as he was sleeping somewhere else. Before Beowulf could get to the great hall, the beast had already left and taken King Hrothgar's best friend. Hrothgar ran to awake Beowulf, as he knew that he would be the only one to defeat the creature. Beowulf once again readied himself for a fight, and he and his soldiers made their way to the monster's lair. The monster's lair was found deep within a dark, muddy lake, and Beowulf swam for what seemed like forever before he reached the underwater cave's opening. Waiting at the entrance of the cave was Grendel's monstrous mother, and she quickly swam towards Beowulf, hoping to get her revenge at last. But Beowulf was quick to dodge her attack, and he swung his sword, but the sword was unable to harm the beast's thick skin. Beowulf threw away his sword and began to wrestle with the monster, but she was much too strong. As the fight continued, the two made their way into the monster's cave. Just as Beowulf believed he may not win this fight, he spotted a large sword sitting atop a pile of forgotten weapons. Beowulf quickly took the sword and lunged towards the monster. As he swung the sword, it revealed its magical powers, and the monster was defeated at last. Beowulf's soldiers had almost lost hope, but as Beowulf came up from the monster's lair, he shouted out his victory, and his men cheered and celebrated the monster's defeat. The next morning Hrothgar gave more treasures to Beowulf and his men, and thanked him for saving Daneland once again. Hrothgar proclaimed that Geatland and Daneland would be friends forevermore. Beowulf and his men sailed back home, and they rejoiced knowing that they had brought peace back to Daneland. Thank you for listening. Adaptation by Faith Bozer and based upon the story of Beowulf.